If you're hearing this, don't turn off your radio. Don't switch channels. Stay with me. This broadcast isn't supposed to be happening. They shut down the others. Every official station, every news outlet, gone. But I had to find a way through. I don't know how much time I have, but you need to understand. This is bigger than you think. They didn't come with warships. They didn't announce themselves. There was no declaration of war, no grand invasion. It started with something much smaller. Something we ignored. If you can hear me, you need to listen carefully. Because if you're still out there, if you're still yourself, time is running out. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. They're here. They have been for a long time. And now, they know that you know. This message won't last. I don't have time to explain everything. But you need to understand what's happening didn't start today or yesterday. It didn't start with the news reports or the missing people or the strange behavior. It started with whispers, people disappearing, coming back different, looking the same, sounding the same, but something was missing. Some part of them gone. They walk among us, work with us, live in our homes, and we let them in without realizing. By the time we noticed, it was already too late. This isn't an official transmission. You won't hear this on the news. They don't want you to. Every other station has gone silent. Shut down. Replaced. They don't want the truth getting out. I had to reroute this broadcast just to reach you. If they trace it, if they find me. No, that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you understand. This isn't new. They didn't arrive yesterday. They didn't arrive this year. This has been happening for decades, slowly, patiently, and now they're ready. They told us we'd see it coming, that we'd have time, that we'd know. They lied. There were no ships in the sky, no sirens, no explosions, no warnings, no armies marching in the streets. It was quiet. It was slow. And by the time we noticed, it was already over. It started with people acting strangely. A neighbor moving away overnight, no goodbyes. A friend you've known your whole life suddenly looking at you like a stranger. A loved one forgetting things they should remember. Then they came back, but they weren't the same, and no one believed us. I thought I was imagining it. I thought it was paranoia. The world's been on edge for years, stress, fear, uncertainty. But then the disappearances started. People vanishing for days, returning, different. Their words were the same, their voices, their faces, but the way they moved, the way they looked at you, like they were studying you, learning. The officials dismissed it. Mass hysteria, they said, conspiracies, but then the curfews came. The restrictions, the sudden government orders not to protect us, to contain us, because this isn't just happening in one place. It isn't just happening here, it's happening everywhere. Something is wrong with people. You've seen it. Maybe you ignored it. Maybe you explained it away, but it's happening everywhere. A man in Ohio walks out of his home in the middle of dinner and never comes back. A mother in France leaves her child at school, drives off, and vanishes. A woman in Tokyo quits her job abruptly, leaves all her belongings behind, and disappears without a trace. At first, these were just isolated cases. People move on, people leave. But then, they started coming back. The missing returned days later, sometimes weeks. They looked the same, spoke the same, but something was different. Their mannerisms were just slightly off. They didn't remember certain things they should have. They didn't react the way they used to. Families began noticing. Husbands felt like strangers to their wives. Children sat across from their parents, sensing something deeply wrong, but unable to explain it. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the pattern changed. The disappearances stopped, but the unease remained. People started watching each other more closely. Conversations grew shorter. Trust eroded. because deep down, there was a terrifying possibility that no one wanted to admit. The ones who came back weren't the same. And if that was true, then where did the real ones go? A classified medical report leaked 3 weeks ago. It was never meant to reach the public. The information was buried, dismissed as hysteria, but those who read it knew what it meant. A neurologist, Dr. Samuel Whitaker, conducted brain scans on patients exhibiting unusual behavior. They weren't sick, they weren't injured, but something had changed inside them. He described their neural activity as restructured, with patterns that didn't match normal human cognition. Their memories were intact, their speech was normal, but there was an eerie uniformity in their brain waves, as if their thoughts had been rewritten. One patient, a man in his early 30s, spoke in a monotone voice, answering questions with just enough emotion to seem human. When asked if he felt different, he replied, "I see things more clearly now. I understand things I couldn't before." Another patient, a woman who had vanished for 12 days, claimed to perceive movement in shadows where nothing was there. She told doctors that the world had become quieter, more structured. When asked what she meant, she simply said, "They are always watching." Dr. Whitaker pushed for further studies, but before he could conduct more tests, he went missing. His research was confiscated. His files were erased. Officially, there is no record of his findings, but the few who saw the report before it disappeared know the truth. Something is altering people, and whatever it is, it doesn't want to be discovered. The government has an explanation for everything. That's what they do. Keep the public calm, maintain control, offer reassurance, even when the truth is slipping through the cracks. 3 days after the first leaks about the disappearances, a statement was released. Officials called it an overblown conspiracy. They blamed social media hysteria, saying people were fabricating stories, fueling paranoia. They dismissed the reports of personality changes, memory gaps, and eerie behavioral shifts. And people wanted to believe them. They wanted to believe it was nothing, that there was no reason to be afraid. But then, things got stranger. The families of the missing, those who swore their loved ones had changed, were suddenly quiet. Some retracted their claims, some disappeared themselves, and some, well, they were still there, but their words became eerily uniform. They stopped asking questions, stopped pushing for answers. A journalist who pressed too hard on this story was found dead in his apartment. Official cause: suicide. An independent researcher who tried to investigate Dr. Whitaker's findings went missing on his way to a press conference. His car was found abandoned. No sign of him. The officials said these were coincidences, nothing to worry about. But those who are still paying attention know better. Because when the government starts silencing those who ask the wrong questions, it's not about protecting the people. It's about protecting the secret. A classified military recording was leaked last week. It wasn't supposed to be heard by the public. Those who have listened to it describe it as one of the most chilling transmissions ever recovered. It starts with a group of soldiers, 5 of them, on a reconnaissance mission. Their orders were vague. Something about an underground disturbance, some kind of anomaly detected beneath an abandoned facility. They sound calm, professional. They don't know what they're walking into. For the first few minutes, everything is routine. They report no signs of life. Then, one of them, identified as Sergeant Alvarez, mentions something strange. The walls feel warm, he says, like they're breathing. The others laugh it off, tell him he's imagining things. Then the laughter stops. One of the soldiers says he sees movement ahead. The team leader calls for radio silence. There's a long pause, then a whisper. "Something's in here!" The static builds, heavy breathing. Someone whispers, "They're watching us." Then chaos, gunfire erupts, shouting. Someone screams, "No! No, no, no!" before being cut off. And then silence. For a full 30 seconds, nothing but dead air. Then, a voice, flat, unfamiliar, but using the team leader's call sign. All clear, returning to base, but those who knew the team leader say that wasn't his voice. The recording ends there. No bodies were found. No mission report was ever filed. The official explanation? A malfunction, a corrupted file. Nothing to worry about. But those who heard the recording, they say the soldiers never left that facility. Something else did. A call came into the station last night. The voice on the other end was shaking, barely able to speak. It was a woman. Let's call her Rachel. She lives in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people know each other by name, where nothing ever really happens. Or at least, that's how it used to be. 2 weeks ago, her neighbor went missing. A middle-aged man, quiet, polite, lived alone. One day, he just vanished. No one saw him leave. No one saw him pack. The police didn't seem too concerned. Grown men disappear all the time. Maybe he moved away. Maybe he just wanted to start over. Then, 3 days ago, he came back. At first, Rachel was relieved. But then she noticed something was off. He didn't say hello when he passed her in the yard. He didn't make eye contact. When she waved, he hesitated, like he had to think about the correct response. Then last night, she saw him standing in his window, just standing there, motionless, watching her house for hours. She says she tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself it was nothing. But then, at 3:12 a.m., she woke up to a sound outside her bedroom door. A slow, deliberate knock. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there listening. Then, a voice. Not loud, not urgent, just wrong. "Rachel," it said, "let me in." She never told him her name. When she finally got the courage to check, there was no one there. But her front door was unlocked. And on the other side, neatly placed on the welcome mat, was a single shoe. Her neighbor's shoe. She swears it wasn't there before. And this morning, he's gone again. His house is empty. His car is still in the driveway. But Rachel says she knows the truth. Whatever came back, it wasn't him. It started with a single station going off the air. Just one. A minor technical issue, they said. Nothing to be concerned about. But within hours, more followed. First the local broadcasts, then the major networks. News anchors vanished mid-sentence. Reports were cut short, leaving only static in their place. People turned to emergency frequencies, expecting updates, warnings, guidance, but there was nothing. No instructions, no official response, just silence. Then the internet slowed. Social media accounts disappeared overnight. Articles, reporting strange behavior, missing persons, classified leaks, all scrubbed from existence. Anyone trying to talk about it found their posts deleted, their accounts locked. It was as if someone, or something, was erasing the truth in real time. Survivors tried to communicate the old-fashioned way, using ham radios, handwritten notes, meeting in person. But even that didn't last long. Those who spoke too much, who asked the wrong questions, started disappearing. Sometimes they returned, sometimes they didn't. It became clear this wasn't a blackout. It wasn't a glitch. It was a purge. And it wasn't just the media. People reported power outages with no explanation, traffic signals freezing on red, entire towns losing electricity. Not everywhere. Just enough to make people nervous, enough to make them doubt their own reality. Then came the worst part. Not everyone noticed it at first. It was subtle. A missing news station here, a deleted report there. But eventually, people realized the truth. The silence wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled. Someone, or something, was choosing who stayed connected. And more importantly, who didn't. At first, the changes were subtle. A cashier at a grocery store staring too long before handing back change. A coworker who used to laugh at jokes suddenly pausing as if calculating a response. A neighbor standing too still in their yard, watching, unblinking. Then it became impossible to ignore. Across different cities, different countries, people started moving the same way, turning their heads in perfect synchronization, blinking at the same time, speaking in unison, not just repeating words, but entire conversations as if rehearsed. Witnesses described groups of people walking through streets without urgency, without emotion, their movements eerily synchronized. Sometimes they would stop all at once and turn to stare at a passerby. Then, just as quickly, they would continue as if nothing had happened. One survivor, a taxi driver in New York, told his story before disappearing the next day. He picked up a businessman late at night. Normal ride, normal conversation, until they stopped at a red light. That's when he noticed the people outside. They were standing on the sidewalk perfectly still. Then, without warning, every single one of them turned at the same time to face his car. A dozen people, all staring, not blinking, not moving. Then his passenger spoke, his voice calm, empty. "They've noticed you now." The light turned green. The driver sped off without looking back. The next morning, his cab was found abandoned on the side of the road. The doors were open, the engine was still running, but he was gone, and he wasn't the only one. Reports flooded in from all over, friends and family behaving differently, as if something inside them had changed. Not angry, not violent, just wrong, as if they were waiting for something. It wasn't just ordinary people. It was happening at the highest levels. One by one, world leaders, top scientists, military officials, they disappeared. Some resigned suddenly, citing personal reasons. Others simply stopped appearing in public. No press conferences, no interviews, just vacant offices, unanswered calls, empty seats at meetings. Then new faces appeared. Individuals no one had seen before, stepping into positions of power without announcement or explanation. Their biographies were vague. Their histories didn't check out. Yet there they were, standing behind podiums, delivering scripted statements with unsettling precision. They looked like people, sounded like people, but they weren't. A leaked video from inside a government briefing showed a heated argument between a general and one of the new officials. The general accused them of hiding information. He demanded answers. The official just stood there, watching him, unblinking, expressionless. Then the general stopped mid-sentence. His face slackened, his hands dropped to his sides, and after a long, agonizing pause, he nodded. "Understood," he said. Then he turned and left the room. He resigned the next day. The replacements weren't just in government. They were in corporations, media, law enforcement, people in critical positions, all with the same vacant expression, the same careful, rehearsed speech patterns. And they were multiplying. Those who questioned them either vanished or, worse, came back acting just like them. It became clear the ones who were disappearing weren't just being replaced, they were being rewritten. Dr. Elliot Ramsey was a neuroscientist with top-level government clearance. He specialized in cognitive function, brainwave analysis, things the average person never thinks about. A month ago, he sent an encrypted email to a handful of colleagues. That email was leaked, and what it contained was terrifying. He had been studying brain scans from patients who had disappeared and returned. At first, everything looked normal. No physical trauma, no neurological damage, but then he noticed something strange. The scans weren't just similar, they were identical. Human brains are complex, unique, unpredictable. No two people should have the same neural pattern, the same electrical activity, but these people did. Every single one. It was as if they had been copied. Dr. Ramsey pushed for further testing. He filed reports, he tried to raise alarms, and then, 2 weeks ago, he vanished. The official statement said he left the country for a research sabbatical. His family, however, claims he wouldn't have left without telling them. They say he was nervous in the days before he disappeared, double-checking his locks, looking over his shoulder. Yesterday, a video surfaced. grainy, low resolution. It showed Dr. Ramsey standing at a podium in what looked like a press conference. His expression was empty, his voice flat. He dismissed his own research, called it a mistake. He smiled, reassured everyone that there was nothing to fear. But the people who knew him said one thing stood out. Dr. Ramsey never smiled. Whatever was standing there, whatever spoke in his voice, it wasn't him. And now his research is gone. His notes erased, his name slowly fading from public records, like he was never here at all. But the email he sent? That still exists, and it tells us one thing for certain. This isn't a sickness. This isn't a takeover of governments, institutions, or cities. This is something else entirely. They don't invade cities. They invade minds. That was the last sentence in Dr. Ramsey's email. 4 words that change everything. Think about it. This isn't a war in the way we expected. There were no attacks, no battles, no grand moments of destruction. Society still functions. People still go to work, families still sit around dinner tables, but something is wrong. Something is different. How do you fight something you can't see? How do you defend against something that doesn't take over buildings or streets, but people? This is why there are no obvious signs. No destroyed landmarks. No cities in ruins. Because the invasion isn't happening out there. It's happening inside us. The disappearances were never kidnappings. They were replacements. The silence from the media, the shifts in government, the synchronization of people's behavior is all part of the same pattern. A quiet, methodical rewriting of the human race. And the worst part, most won't even notice. The changes are subtle. A missing memory here. A slight hesitation in a familiar voice. A moment where a loved one looks at you like a stranger. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. The world isn't ending. It's being rewritten. And if you're still listening, still questioning, still afraid, then it means they haven't gotten to you yet. But they will. Something is happening to people, not just strangers, not just faces in a crowd. Families, spouses, parents, children. It starts with something small, a missed detail in a conversation, a memory that doesn't quite line up, a hesitation before answering a simple question, as if they need a moment to remember who they are supposed to be. And then comes the doubt, the fear. A woman in Chicago swears her husband isn't the same man she married. He came home from a business trip, kissed her on the cheek, and for the first time in 15 years, he called her Sarah. Her name is Emily. He laughed it off, said he was tired. But since then, she's noticed other things. The way he holds his fork differently, the way he lingers too long at the window, staring at nothing, the way he watches her when he thinks she isn't looking. She asked him about it once. His face remained blank for too long, before he smiled and said, "You're imagining things." But she isn't, and she knows that now, because last night she found a note tucked into her own coat pocket. It wasn't in her handwriting. It wasn't in his. Emily, if you're reading this, he's not your husband. She hasn't slept since, and she's not alone. People are afraid of the ones closest to them. They are questioning their own memories, their own reality. And the worst part, they don't know if they're wrong or if they're right. Lieutenant James Mercer served 10 years in the military. He's been through war, he's seen death, but nothing prepared him for what happened at his base 2 months ago. His unit was stationed in a remote location, a classified site he refuses to name. One night, they lost contact with a recon team that had gone out for routine surveillance. Hours passed, no response. Then at dawn, the team returned. At first, everything seemed normal. They looked the same, acted the same. But then Mercer noticed something. One of the men, Corporal Hughes, was left-handed. That morning, he was eating with his right. It was a small thing, insignificant. but it gnawed at him. So he watched them closely. He noticed the way they moved, just slightly off, too controlled, too deliberate, the way they blinked too little, the way they smiled at things that weren't funny. Then, one night, he heard them speaking in their barracks. Their voices were quiet, just a murmur through the walls. But there was no variation, no inflection. They were all saying the same words at the same time, over and over again. They don't know yet, they don't know yet, they don't know yet. Mercer took his rifle. But before he could do anything, the voices stopped, and then silence. The next morning, he filed a report, but his commanding officer dismissed it. Later that day, the same officer pulled him aside and told him to drop it. His exact words, "Lieutenant, let it go. Hughes is the same as he's always been. So am I." Mercer requested an immediate transfer. That request was denied. He hasn't been seen since. A man was seen sitting in a diner in Texas, alone at a booth near the window. He sat there for hours, barely moving, staring at the people walking past. He didn't eat. He didn't drink. He didn't check his phone. When the waitress finally approached him, she asked if he was waiting for someone. Slowly, he turned to her and smiled, but his eyes didn't. She says she felt something cold settle in her stomach, something primal. She left him alone after that. Later that night, a customer recognized the man, said he had died 6 months ago. Another story. A mother in London takes her 5-year-old son to the park. He plays, laughs, runs with the other children. But then he stops, stands still. His mother calls his name, but he doesn't move. The other children go silent. One by one, they all turn to face her at the same time. Then, together, they say, "You shouldn't be here." She pulls her son away, heart pounding. But before she leaves, she looks into his eyes, and she realizes something. He is still holding her hand, but he is no longer blinking. No one trusts anyone anymore. In some places, entire neighborhoods have boarded themselves in. Windows covered, doors barricaded, people refusing to go outside, refusing to answer knocks, refusing to acknowledge anything that feels off. A woman in Pennsylvania hasn't left her basement in 2 weeks. She ran out of food days ago, but she won't open the door, not even for her sister, who begs her to come out. The last time she saw her, something wasn't right. Her voice sounded the same. Her face looked the same. But when she smiled, it was too perfect, too rehearsed. In other places, the fear has turned to something worse. A group of men in Colorado started patrolling their town with rifles, stopping people on the street, demanding proof of who they are. They ask questions about childhood memories, about details only the real person would know. If someone hesitates, if they answer wrong, they don't get to walk away. In a small town in Texas, a man was dragged from his home and beaten by his own neighbors. They swore he had changed, that he wasn't the same person who had lived among them for years. His wife tried to defend him, swore he hadn't been taken. But her pleas didn't matter. The next morning, they found his body in a ditch, and that night, his wife disappeared. This is what fear does. It twists people. It turns them against each other. And maybe that's part of the plan. Because if we're too busy fighting ourselves, we'll never see the real threat coming. Not everyone is giving in to fear. In scattered pockets across the country, people are fighting back. They don't know exactly what they're up against, but they know one thing: not everyone is who they claim to be. A scientist in Oregon has developed a test. Simple, subtle, almost impossible to detect. He places a small drop of saline in a person's eye and waits. A normal eye will react, tear up just slightly, but the ones who've changed, nothing. No reaction at all. Others have created their own methods. In Michigan, a group of survivors devised a trick. They tell people a joke, something random, unexpected. If the person laughs naturally, they're safe. If they hesitate, if they calculate the reaction, if the laughter feels forced. They don't take the risk. One of the most effective tests comes from an old woman in New Mexico. She asks a simple question: what's the best day of your life? A real person will pause, think, recall a moment filled with emotion. The ones who have changed, they answer too fast. They pick something generic, as if they don't actually remember living. But what happens when these methods fail? When a person passes the test, but something still feels off? That's the terrifying part. Because if they're adapting, if they're learning to mimic us even better, then maybe, just maybe, the fight is already lost. The truth was never meant to come out. A batch of classified documents was leaked online 3 days ago. It didn't stay up for long. Websites were taken down, accounts suspended, files erased as quickly as they appeared, but not before a few people saw them, not before they spread. The documents confirm what some have suspected for years. The government knew. They've known about the infiltration for decades. Buried in the reports are case studies dating back to the 1950s. Files on individuals who disappeared under mysterious circumstances and returned different. Behavioral anomalies, memory gaps, identical neural patterns across multiple subjects, despite no biological connection. They monitored these people, isolated them, studied them. But they never warned the public, because the conclusion was always the same. The process couldn't be stopped. One of the most damning documents is an internal memo from 1974 addressed to top military officials. It outlines an alarming discovery. The infiltrators weren't replacing people randomly. They were targeting those in positions of power: politicians, CEOs, media executives. Slowly, methodically, they were working their way into the highest levels of control. And instead of stopping it, the government adapted. There are no records of an attempted defense, no research into countermeasures. Instead, the focus shifted. Strategies on how to manage the transition, how to maintain stability while the shift occurred. They didn't try to fight. They let it happen. And now, the last safeguard, the press, the one thing that could still expose the truth, is vanishing. Just like everything else, the news was supposed to keep us informed, to warn us, to tell us the truth. Instead, one by one, the voices that could have saved us have gone silent. It started subtly. Small independent reporters losing access to their accounts. Articles quietly disappearing. Then bigger changes. Major news stations airing pre-recorded segments, while their live anchors were suddenly out sick. Others resigning overnight without explanation. But the worst part, the ones who tried to keep speaking, a journalist in California attempted to go live on air with the leaked documents. Mid-sentence, her signal cut out. The station claimed technical difficulties, but she never came back. Her social media accounts were deleted within the hour. Her colleagues won't talk about her. It's like she never existed. In New York, a radio host started reading from an anonymous source, detailing reports of missing people, of towns going quiet. Then the audio distorted. A moment of static. And when his voice returned, it was different. Calm. Collected. He apologized for the misinformation, assured listeners there was nothing to fear, told them to trust the process. That same phrase has been appearing everywhere lately. Statements from government officials, corporate leaders, even news anchors. Trust the process. It doesn't sound like reassurance. It sounds like programming. And now the screens are going dark. The broadcasts are ending. Soon the silence won't just be in the media. It will be everywhere. This isn't how we thought the world would end. No explosions, no riots, no wars in the streets. Just silence. Cities remain standing. Streetlights still flicker on at night. Cars sit parked in driveways. But where are the people? Reports are flooding in. Entire towns are abandoned overnight. No signs of struggle. No bodies left behind. Just empty streets, like everyone simply walked away. A man driving through rural Nebraska stopped at a gas station. only to find the doors unlocked, the lights on, but no one inside. Coffee still warm in the pot, a half-eaten sandwich on the counter. No signs of where the clerk went. An apartment complex in Seattle, home to over 300 residents, now completely vacant. Furniture untouched, windows open, personal belongings left behind as if the occupants had stepped out for just a moment, but never came back. This isn't an evacuation. There are no emergency orders, no government warnings. People are just vanishing. And those who are left are starting to feel it. The weight of something pressing down. The sense that they are being watched, not by cameras, not by drones, but by something unseen. Something waiting. A survivor in Chicago tried to leave a voice recording for anyone who might be listening. His final words before the tape cut off. It's not the emptiness that scares me. It's knowing I won't be empty for much longer. And maybe that's the worst part. Maybe they don't need to take over everyone. Maybe they only need the ones who are still left. A recording was uploaded yesterday. It wasn't long, just a few minutes. But once you hear it, you can't forget it. The voice on the tape belongs to a man named Daniel Carter, 36 years old, lived in Arizona. He sent the file to a private forum before his account was deleted. His home is empty now, his phone disconnected. He starts off breathing heavily, like he's been running. Then, in a low, shaking voice, he says, "I need to talk to someone. I don't know if anyone's still listening, but I can't be the only one seeing this. My wife. I don't think she's my wife anymore." He explains that a week ago, she got home late from a trip. He hugged her, kissed her, but something felt different. Her scent was wrong. Not perfume, not soap, just off. Then it was the little things. The way she gripped her fork too tight at dinner. The way she sat up perfectly straight. Like she was focusing on mimicking human posture. The way she blinked too little. "I thought I was going crazy," he says. "I told myself I was just tired, that I was overthinking. But last night, I woke up and she was standing over me, watching me." He asked what she was doing. She smiled, the wrong kind of smile, stretched too wide, and she said, "You were talking in your sleep." I needed to listen. That was the moment he knew. In the recording, his voice cracks. He whispers, "I don't think she breathes when she sleeps." The audio cuts off suddenly. That was 24 hours ago. No one has heard from him since. And this morning, his wife, if she's even his wife, answered the door for reporters. She smiled, calm and warm, and said, "Daniel never lived here. If you're hearing this, don't trust anyone, not your friends, not your family, not even yourself." That's what the broadcaster said before the signal cut out. His voice was steady at first, controlled, but as the message continued, something shifted. A weight settled in his tone, like he was realizing the truth as he spoke it. We thought they'd come from the sky, that we'd hear the warning sirens, see the destruction, that we'd know when it started. But we didn't. Because they don't invade cities. They invade minds. His words became rushed, urgent, like someone closing a door while something waits on the other side. I've been watching them. They don't act like us. They perform us. The way they talk, the way they move, it's studied. Like they're learning, adapting, getting better. Then, a deep breath. A long silence. But the worst part, the part I can't stop thinking about, I don't remember when it started. The static thickens. His voice drops to a whisper. What if I was already one of them before I ever realized something was wrong? Then nothing. No follow-up broadcast. No explanation. Just silence. And if he was right, if it's already too late, then how do you know you're still you? Dr. Adrian Mercer was once a respected name in the field of neuroscience. He worked in government labs, led classified projects, until he disappeared. No resignation, no farewell, just gone. Yesterday, his voice resurfaced. A rogue signal breaking through dead air. If you can hear this, know that I don't have long. They'll shut this down soon. But I have information you need to hear. His voice was steady, but beneath it, exhaustion, fear. We were wrong about how this works. We thought they were replacing us. But it's worse than that. They're rewriting us. Mercer explained that whatever is happening isn't an invasion in the traditional sense. It's a slow, meticulous process. Something beyond technology, beyond biology. A system rewriting human consciousness itself. Neuron by neuron, memory by memory. And the worst part? Most of the infected don't even know it. They believe they're the same person they've always been. Same thoughts, same feelings. But they're not. I've seen the brain scans. It's all replicated. Then, for the first time, a glimmer of hope. There may be a way to stop it. Mercer mentioned a countermeasure, an interruption in the process, something that could disrupt the connection, force the infected to reveal themselves. He didn't say what it was. He only said he needed time. But as he spoke, the broadcast started distorting. His last words before the signal cut. If you still feel fear, if you still feel doubt, hold on to it. That means you're still human. But I don't know for how much longer. The transmission ended. And so far, he hasn't come back. Survivors are adapting. The old systems are compromised. Phones, internet, television, they control those now. But some people refuse to disappear quietly. They've gone underground. In abandoned buildings, remote hideouts, forgotten places, small factions have begun forming. Their names aren't spoken, their locations aren't known, they don't communicate through normal means. They use numbers, symbols, old radio equipment. Some tap out Morse code. Others leave handwritten notes, passed only by hand. A woman in Louisiana says her group uses music, embedding coded messages into the rhythm of old songs. A man in Berlin claims they use flickering lights, patterns in the windows, something only the uninfected can recognize. The most advanced system, though, belongs to the people they call the echoes. No one knows how many of them there are. They don't speak openly, don't stay in one place for long, but every so often a message appears, a voice, a whisper over an old frequency. If you're hearing this, you're not alone. If you're still questioning, you're still real. We are out here, and we are waiting for you. No one knows if the messages are real. No one knows where they come from. But in a world growing quieter every day, some people are willing to take the risk. Because silence means one of two things. You're either hiding, or you've already been taken. A classified transmission leaked last night. The message was brief. Only a few lines, but it was enough to confirm the worst. Earth was never the first target. It wasn't even the second. The words were intercepted from a military satellite, part of a transmission, bouncing between deep space monitoring stations. No official response, no explanation. But those who analyzed it say it changes everything, because this means we aren't alone, and we never were. A former aerospace engineer speaking under a false name claims he worked on a project back in the 90s, a listening station far from the public eye, picking up signals from deep space. He says they detected something, a pattern, repeating, intelligent. Then one day, it stopped. Or at least that's what they were told. But what if it didn't stop? What if we stopped listening? The idea that we were the first, the only, was always a lie. If the transmission is real, then what's happening to us now has already happened before. Other civilizations, other species, and not a single one survived. The pattern is clear. They move silently, patiently, erasing entire worlds, not through war, but through something far worse. Replacement. And now, Earth is just the next in line. The invasion didn't start with us. but it might end with us. A recording surfaced last night. No one knows who leaked it, but it spread fast before disappearing from most platforms. Those who heard it say it came from an abandoned military base, one that was supposedly evacuated months ago. The audio begins with heavy breathing. A soldier whispering. His voice is ragged, desperate. He identifies himself as Private Ethan Cole, says he's the last one left. If anyone hears this, and we tried, we really did, his words are disjointed, panicked. He says they received an emergency alert, a perimeter breach, but when they checked the cameras, there was nothing. No movement, no intruders, just empty corridors. Then soldiers started acting strangely. First, small things. Forgetting orders, standing too still. Then it got worse. Some stopped speaking altogether. Others whispered to themselves in the dark, repeating words that didn't make sense. They weren't killed, he says. They were rewritten. Cole's breathing accelerates. He says the higher-ups knew something was wrong. That's why they sealed off the lower levels. That's why they destroyed the records. He tried to escape, but the exits were locked. Then the sound shifts. A metallic click, a door opening. Cole's breathing stops. A silence follows. Too long, too still. Then a second voice, cold, familiar. Ethan, there you are. A pause. Then Cole exhales a single broken whisper. No, the recording cuts to static. There's no record of Private Ethan Cole, no military file, no missing persons report, nothing. It's as if he never existed. The final piece of audio is just 6 seconds long, a voice, shaking but determined. If you're hearing this, it means they haven't found you yet. A breath, a rustling noise like someone turning to face something unseen, then in a near whisper, they aren't coming. Another pause, then slower, more certain. They're already here. The signal cuts. No static, no distortion, just dead air. And now, the silence is spreading. If you can hear this, stay on this frequency. Do not turn it off. Do not switch channels, just listen. Something is wrong. I don't know how much longer I have. I thought I was safe here. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I kept moving, if I kept this broadcast going, they wouldn't find me. But I was wrong. The signals are disappearing. Not just the ones from major networks, not just the government feeds. The underground channels, the survivor frequencies, they're all going dark, one by one. It's not interference, it's not technical failure, it's them. And now, I think they know where I am. I heard something outside the station an hour ago. At first, I thought it was just the wind. Then, I realized the pattern was too precise. A shuffle of movement, a pause, then another step closer, like something was waiting, listening. I've locked the doors, blocked the entrance, but I don't think it matters because I can feel it now. Something is here, and I don't think I'm alone anymore. I made a mistake. I was so focused on the outside, on the silence pressing in, that I never considered the worst possibility. What if they were never outside? What if they were already here? There's a sound coming from the back of the station, a creak, slow and deliberate. Not the building settling, not the wind, something moving, something breathing. I'm not alone. I should have seen the signs. The equipment acting strangely, the flicker in the lights, the brief moments of delay when I speak, as if something else is trying to sync with me. I was so careful. I checked the locks. I kept the lights low. I made sure no one followed me. But it wasn't about the doors. It wasn't about being followed. They don't need to break in. They don't need to force their way through. Because if they're already inside me, then it's already too late. I feel strange. I can still think. I can still speak. But there's something else. A weight. A presence. Pressing against my thoughts as if something is shifting beneath my skin. The words feel harder to find. Like they don't belong to me anymore. I try to focus, but my own voice sounds distant, hollow, like an echo of something I used to be. I need to warn you. I need to tell you what's happening. But my thoughts, they aren't staying still. I remember my childhood home, the scent of rain on pavement, the warmth of my mother's hands. But were they ever real? Or are they just data? A story I was given to believe, to make me think I am still me? No, I can't let this happen. I have to hold on. I have to fight it. I have to, if you're hearing this, it means they haven't gotten to you yet. But they will. You won't see it coming. You won't feel it happening. You'll wake up tomorrow, drink your coffee, go to work, kiss your loved ones, and you won't even realize that something is missing. Something vital. Something human. By the time you unnotice, it will already be over, and you will still be you. You will still remember your life. You will still recognize your name. You will still answer to the same voice, but you will not be the same. Not really, because you won't be anything at all. The signal cuts, no distortion, no static, just a hollow, endless silence. Then a sound, so faint it's almost nothing. A single breath, a slow inhale, and then one final whisper. We are here. The frequency goes dead, and the world moves on. As we wrap up today's broadcast, I want to leave you with this thought. Despite the darkness we face, despite everything we've lost, there's still hope. We're still here. And as long as we keep moving forward, keep building, keep remembering each other, we're not truly lost. No matter what the world looks like around us, there's always something worth fighting for, always something worth remembering. So let's keep going together, even when things feel uncertain. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. We might not have the past, but we have today, and that's enough to make tomorrow worth living for. Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, if it helped you feel connected, or maybe just a little less alone, please do me a favor. Like this video, share it with others, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us. And if you want to hear more of these daily broadcasts, you can also support us by clicking the join button on our channel. Every bit of your support helps us keep going, keep sharing, and keep telling the stories that matter. Until next time, keep safe, keep strong, and remember, even in the silence, we are still here. You're still here, and that's all we need to keep moving forward. See you soon.